Thank you, and welcome to the Wednesday, September 19th meeting of the Easthampton City Council. Could I have a roll call, please?
Justin Cobb.
Present.
Donald Sikowski. Salem Derby.
Present.
Dan Hagan.
Present.
Joseph McCoy.
Here.
Chester Ogalevitz.
Present.
Dan Rist.
Here.
Joey Winnie.
Here.
Nathan Ziegler.
Present.
Could I have a motion to approve the minutes of the previous meeting?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion on the table to approve the minutes of the previous meeting. Any further comment or amendments to the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
And no opposition, no abstentions? Okay. At this time, what we'll enter into, if there's anybody here in the audience who would like to speak to the City Council on anything that's not currently on our public hearing agenda, please step forward, state your name and address for the record.
Hello, I'm Patrick Bruff from the Greater Easthampton Chamber of Commerce at 107, well, I live at 107 Berg Street. I just wanted to take a minute to talk to the council, let you guys know a little bit of an update on what's happening with the Chamber's role in becoming an information conduit during the bridge, the Manhattan Bridge construction project. Eric Snyder, the director, and I met with members from the Mass DOT who are going to be responsible for getting us some information during the process, during the bridge construction and all the construction that is going to happen at the intersections before the bridge closes. The Chamber is working on putting together a email blast type system through Constant Contact that anyone from the public, any of the businesses, anyone in general will be able to sign up for. Mass DOT has talked to us, and they said that they are going to be giving us updates as needed as things go forward. So we're working on, again, that email blast system, and we're also working on a text alert system, one of those things where you can get kind of a quick update on your phone or via email, whichever suits the person who is interested in receiving the information. I just thought I would give you guys the update. I had sent an email probably a week or so ago in regards to the meeting, and if there's anything the council has or anything they can think of as far as what we can do for the public or for the business community during this time, we would love to hear it. That's all. Thank you.
Are there any other members who would like to step forward? Please state your name and address for the record, please.
Hello, my name is Jonas Figueroa, and I'm from Easthampton High School. I'm here to talk about the town hall meeting that's taking place Thursday, October 4th from 5 to 7.
There will be dinner.
Yes,
Joe Zarnick, Easthampton High School. There will be dinner, and it will be served from 5 to 5:30, and it will be held in the Easthampton High School cafeteria at 70 Williston Avenue.
Nancy Dunn, Easthampton High School, and 36 Westview Terrace in Easthampton. These are students from the SAD group at the high school who've helped. I'm a co-chair of the Easthampton Task Force, and this town hall style meeting is to address underage drinking and marijuana prevention. There will be dinner served, as they said, and there will be some key speakers. The speakers will be Yvonne Pesci from the she's the Assistant District Attorney in Northampton. Alan Shadle will be speaking. Some SAD members will be speaking from the high school, and Meg Croplin, who's a child and family therapist, will be addressing parents and how they can specifically help their children address this issue in our community. So I'm going to leave these flyers with the City Council, and if you're more than welcome to come, and we're just trying to get the word out. Thank you.
Are there any other members of the public who would like to step forward and address the City Council, any matter that's not currently on our public hearing agenda? Seeing none, I'll move on to communications from elected officials and boards and committees. One little item.
Okay, yes, the only really correspondence or communication we have is a reminder that tomorrow night is the conclusion of the terrific Bear Fest, where we auction off some of those outstanding bears that you've seen all over town. The event starts tomorrow at 6 p.m. at the Log Cabin. The auction starts around 8. It is a ticketed event, so if you're interested, please you can buy the tickets at the door. And check with Bear Fest organizer as far as the exact price on that. But again, it all starts tomorrow at 6 o'clock at Log Cabin, and it's a terrific event. So try to attend. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor communication. Anything tonight? No report. Okay, that said, we'll go on to committee reports. Rules, Councilor Rist.
Yes, Mr. President, the Rules Committee did meet last evening. We had a very lengthy and very good discussion regarding Chapter 32B, Sections 21 to 23. It was well attended by the Insurance Advisory Committee, our Finance Director, Melissa Zawadsky, members of the committee, Councilor McCoy, and of course, Representative John Sybeck, who was instrumental in writing the law. I would remind councilors this is a big deal, and we are meeting again on October 2nd, Room 1 at 6 p.m. to continue discussions with Representative Sybeck. It has to do with changing our health care laws and the collective bargaining negotiations or eliminating the health care from the collective bargaining and how that now will be dealt with by the city and the collective bargaining units in the city. So it's very important. So that's October 2nd. We also met last night with the city arts community and regarding the establishment of a city cultural district, and we did vote 3-0 to establish to recommend the establishment of that district. It needs a public hearing, so I will move to set a public hearing on October 3rd in these chambers at 6:15 for the resolution to establish a city cultural district.
Second.
We have a motion on the table to set a public hearing for the establishment of a city cultural district. All those any discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions or objections? Seeing none, Councilor Rist, you still have the floor.
Yes, I just let the counselor know that on that evening, I will ask Planner Allen to attend, as well as Burns Maxey from the arts community, so if there's any further questions from the council, they will be there. Thank you very much. That concludes.
Finance, Councilor Hagan.
The first item on finance I'd like is the Councilor Psychowski's request to exclude overage 62 from future overrides and debt exclusions. As part of our subcommittee process, we sent a letter off to Department of Revenue because many of the all the subcommittee members didn't feel it was something that we had the authority to take up. And I won't read the whole letter, but I did receive a correspondence back from the Bureau of Municipal Finance Law dated September 6th. And paraphrasing it, it says, Massachusetts cities and towns do not have the power to enact local legislation regarding taxes. Only the legislature can impose taxes on property and authorize exemptions from those taxes. So given the letter from Department of Revenue, I'd like to make a motion that we remove Councilor Psychowski's request to exclude over 65 from future overrides and debt exclusions.
Second.
We have a motion on the table to recommend that the request to exclude over age 62 from future overrides and debt exclusion be removed from the agenda. Any further discussion on this motion? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any objections or abstentions? Okay, hearing none, motion passes. Could I ask that you provide Councilor Psychowski with that letter?
I already provided one in his box, and I know he picked it up. He's not here tonight to confirm that, but he did, has been removed from his box. So.
Thank you. Councilor Hagan, you still have the floor.
Second item was a Councilor Cobb's request for a review of senior exemptions for Mass General Law 59, Section 5. We're still in the information gathering stage on that item. The third matter, which I'd like to take up now, is the clarification of the Riverside Industries window vote. As we got in our last meeting, we received a letter from the mayor requesting that we clarify our appropriation vote, just so that he has our intent, so as the project goes forward, there's no confusion as to what was meant by that vote. We did meet again in the subcommittee and voted 2-0 to, we didn't feel we needed a new appropriation or to amend the appropriation, but we did want to bring forward a motion that would show that our intent, what our intent was on the vote. I did provide everyone with a copy of that motion and also the Secretary of the Interior Standards of Rehabilitation. I'm willing at this point to make a motion, but I know there's a couple of people in the audience, at least I guess, the acting president or acting director of One Cottage, if anyone needs any follow-up information. If not, I can make the motion and we can discuss it from there.
Does any of the councilors have any questions concerning the letter in front of you? There are none? Councilor Hagan.
Therefore, as a clarification motion to our former appropriation, regarding our appropriation of $300,000 for replacement windows at 1 Cottage Street, it is our intent that the city funds are used in compliance with the Secretary of the Interior standards for treatment of historic properties as it relates to replacement contained in Standard 6 of the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to clarify a motion previously approved concerning the $300,000 appropriation for the work at 1 Cottage Street. Is there any further discussion on this motion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions or objections?
Abstain.
So I'm sorry, yeah, I will abstain to be consistent with my previous vote. I'm sorry for that.
Okay. 2 abstentions. Okay, duly noted. Motion passes. Councilor Hagan, you still have the floor.
The last item we have still in finance that we haven't discussed is the supplemental appropriation for $200,000 from CPA funding, which will be in the form of a public hearing at 6:15. I don't believe we'll have a subcommittee meeting next Wednesday, so our next subcommittee meeting will be October 10th at 6 p.m. in room 1. That concludes finance.
Thank you. Okay, we continue, Public Safety, Councilor McCoy.
No report tonight, Mr. President.
Appointments, Councilor Winnie.
Yes, we had 4 appointments put in front of us. Appointment subcommittee met tonight at 5:45, and discussed all 4 appointees, and unanimously voted that we bring all 4 requested appointments forth to the City Council for approval. So I will make this in the form of a motion that the City Council, pursuant to Section 3.3, appoint the following people to the following positions. Linda A. Bush to the Zoning Board of Appeals with her term of expiration of December 31st, 2015. Kate Shapiro to the Zoning Board of Appeals, the Associate Member, with her expiration of December 31st, 2015. Rayma Hutchinson to the PLAE Board of Directors, the Public Library Association of Easthampton, with the term of expiration of December 31st, 2013. And Thomas Raffensberger to the PLAE Public Library Association of Easthampton Board of Directors for December 31st, 2014.
Second.
We have a motion on the table to approve the appointments previously stated. Is there any further comment on this motion? Councilor Winnie.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to make a comment that the PLAE is the Public Library Association Easthampton, 2 appointments from the mayor to the Board of Directors that came along with the agreement that we made with the Easthampton Public Library. And I think that looking at the resumes of the 2 people that applied, we had 2 very good candidates that stepped forward, and I think that they're going to be a really good asset on that board for the city.
I concur. Any further comment on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any objections or abstentions? Councilor Winnie, you still have the floor.
Yes, thank you. The following appointments that are coming up in new business, I would like to make our meeting for 5:45 on October 3rd in the council chambers to review the next appointments in the packet.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, I'm done, thank you.
Okay, we're at 6:15. Could I have a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion to open the public hearing. All those in favor?
Aye.
No abstentions or objections. Councilor Hagan, you have the floor.
Our first public hearing is a supplemental appropriation. I'll do a second reading on it, dated July 30th, 2012. Request is hereby made for approval of the following appropriation. Amount requested $200,000 to be appropriated from CPA Housing Fund in the amount of $150,000, CPA General Fund in the amount of $50,000, to be appropriated to Cottage Street Affordable Housing in the amount of $200,000. The amount requested will be used for the following purpose: to provide support for the development of affordable housing at the former Dye Works building.
Okay, that said, is there anyone in the public who would like to come forward? Please state your name and address for the record.
Mayor Michael Tausnig, I think I live here, but my home address is 166 Hendrick Street. I'm just, as you know, I'm a supporter of the project, and I'm here to lend that support again. This is a modest amount of money to provide for a very necessary project here in downtown. It's fully permitted, and I think this is the last piece of public money that is waiting to put the project together. And hopefully we'll see some construction sometime next year. So I would encourage you to vote in support of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public who would like to come forward and address the council?
Alexis Breitnecker, 63 Maple Street. I'm also on CPA, and I just wanted to say that we unanimously supported this when we passed the motion.
Thank you.
I have a question.
A
first.
question.
We're gonna let
I'll let them.
Oh, is there someone else?
let the public go. Is there any other members of the public who'd like to come forward? Okay, Councilor Hagan. Do you have any, not a motion yet, or anything?
We don't have a motion yet.
No. I was just going to give a couple of facts.
Oh, okay, maybe you have it.
Based on I know the developers are both here, Mr. O'Keefe and Relic, I don't want. So if there's any additional questions before we go to a motion, I'm sure they'd be glad to answer them. As the mayor stated, this particular project has already been permitted through all the other boards, such as the planning board, zoning board, conservation, I believe. The One Arch Street Development, or Arch Street Development, asked the CPA for some type of funding because they felt it would be helpful to them in securing their other grants and funds for this project, and that's why the CPA, as Alexis told us, was unanimous in their support for this project. It's, I believe, a $16 million project approximately. And I think what's important for the public to know and the councilors to know is Arch Street has currently been paying all the tax assessments on this property since they came in. And there are back taxes, which at the time it was in CPA was in the vicinity of $500,000, but it may be closer. The mayor, I think, said at a subcommittee to $590,000, of which a little over $200,000 is in the form of the enterprise fund. This money would be coming back to the city once the money is appropriated and the project goes forward, if everything goes right. There's also a smart growth incentive, a one-time smart growth incentive of $350,000, because this would be our first time that we did something in that smart growth area. I think this is only a one-time, so if another project, we don't get $350 every time a project comes. This is just, as soon as you do one project, you do get that money. Just to give you a little idea of what we still have in CPA, and the finance director's here if I'm off, but this is from Mr. Harrison, who couldn't come tonight. His last thing, and I know he asked the auditor to provide updated figures for tomorrow night's CPA meeting, but we still have approximately $535,000 in general, $173,000 in open, $57,000 in historical, and $165,000 in housing. So a little over $900,000, and it may be a little bit more. We'll find out tomorrow night. I guess at that point, I'm ready to make a motion, but certainly any questions or anyone wants to.
Any of the councilors, Councilor McCoy?
Maybe Councilor Hagan can answer the developers. Just curious, I'm completely in favor of the project. Is it far enough along that you know roughly how many units, or any idea of what?
They could speak to it. I believe it's 50 units, and I think it's broken down into 11 one-bedroom, 32 bedrooms, and 9 three-bedrooms. At least it was at the time. I don't know if these things changed.
That's awesome.
Still is at this time?
Yes.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
Any other questions, Councilor McCoy?
With the affordable housing, it should be increased density due to the ordinance we had passed.
40R.
No, when we had passed an early. That's it, thank you.
Any other counselors have any comments or questions?
No, I'll make a comment. I was gonna do it for the motion.
You can do it now, too. That's up to you.
I think as a gentleman from CPA stated, this is a home run for the community. It's in the right place, it's affordable housing, and there's a windfall in back taxes that the city will have. I just think it's incredibly great that we have this now coming before us, and there's just nothing negative I can think of. As we've had many controversial affordable housing developments, this is not one of them. It's right in the middle. It's perfectly situated. It rehabilitates a historic building. It'll help with the Riverside project. I think there's some connection possible there as well, we talked about. So I just think it's fabulous. I'm a big proponent of affordable housing, and it's nice to see a project come that might actually be easy to get through the community. Thank you.
I have one brief comment that I too fully support this, and actually sent a letter for support to the state. And I encourage all members here to show unanimous support for something that is, as our former counselor said, is a home run for the city. This is one of those few projects that I have heard absolutely nothing negative about. So I'm glad to lend our support. Any further comments or questions for this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye.
No
No,
motion.
we didn't have the
Motion,
motion. I
sorry.
was waiting to make my
Forgot all
comment
about
during the
that.
motion period.
Counselor Hagan?
I'd like to make the following motion, that the full council appropriate the amount of $200,000 to be appropriated from CPA housing funds in the amount of $150,000, CPA general funds in the amount of $50,000, to be appropriated to the Cottage Street Affordable Housing in the amount of $200,000. The amount requested will be used for the following purpose: to provide support for the development of affordable housing at the former Dye Works building.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion on the table for a supplemental appropriation request of $200,000 to be appropriated from $150,000 from CPA Housing Fund, $50,000 from CPA General Fund. This is to be appropriated to the College Street Affordable Housing to provide support for the development of affordable housing at the former Dye Works building. Any further comments on this motion?
Yeah, I have a comment. As being the McKinney-Vento liaison
Yeah.
for the city of Northampton and the city Northampton School Department, every day I deal with homeless families or families that are losing their homes because of the mortgage crisis, and over again having constant contact with our housing authority and the housing authorities in the surrounding area. There is not enough housing to go around, and people are living in hotels in deplorable conditions, and this is just such a wonderful thing that's gonna take 50 families off the streets or out of hotels potentially, and give them a home in our downtown area, which is gonna only increase our pedestrians down there and our livelihood. So I just wanted to make that point that there is really such a need for this, that it's just awesome it's coming forth, and Easthampton is ready and willing to come forth and help with this, so,
Thank you.
yes.
Any other counselors?
Just
Counselor Hagan?
Just one comment. I want to echo a little of what Councilor Riss said and Councilor Winnie. I think this is a very good project. I think this is the real use of CPA housing funds. I know we just had a contentious project in the city, which I personally did not support. But this one, to me, is not dense housing in an existing neighborhood. I think it's reuse of city, not city buildings, but reuse of a building in the city that's not being used. I just think it's a very good project from all standpoints. And I will just comment, because I forgot to mention in the beginning, that both State Senator Knappich and State Representative Sybeck sent letters of support also, saying that they felt it was a good idea.
Okay, Councilor Derby?
Brief. I just want to say I echo the other councilors' comments and just say I enthusiastically support this project and can't wait until we have something similar at 1 Ferry Street as well. So we'll just keep moving forward.
Any further comment from any of the councilors? Hearing none? Now, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any objections or abstentions? None? Motion passes. Congratulations.
Thank you. All right.
Okay, next, Councilor Derby, you're up.
Oh, thank you, Mr. President. So what we have here is we have a bicycle ordinance that has been continued from August 1st, ancient history now. So basically, the origin of this, I'll give a little history here. When I first came on the council 9 years ago, I saw the bike ordinances and said, these are crazy. And it was one of my missions to eventually go through and try to make these a little bit more agreeable to the cyclist. And I never really had the opportunity until we had a petitioner come forward and ask us to take a look at the ordinances and bring them more in line with state law. And so that's exactly what the ordinance subcommittee did. We worked over multiple meetings. We conferred with multiple experts, and the Manhattan Rail Trail Committee being one, and some others that came and joined. And we wordsmithed and pored over these ordinances and found that there were some that we felt needed to stay. And we found that there were some that we could strike and allow state law to be the guiding force for the local enforcement authority, the police. And so what you have in front of you right now is the product of those meetings, and basically a compromise of between the petitioner and the ordinance subcommittee on making the wording and the regulations in Easthampton friendly to the cyclist, and yet preserving safety and making sure that everybody's interests and needs were attended to. So that's my little introduction to this. One of the things that I wanted to let people know before we went forward was I did receive a letter from Bruce McMahon, the police chief, and I didn't have time to get everybody a copy of this letter, so I don't know if now would be an appropriate time or after we open it to public speak, but I just wanted to give you his endorsement. So I'll just read this, it's brief. Salem, I reviewed the draft version of the proposed bicycle ordinance for the city and support the document. As I have stated to you in the past, a city ordinance is more specific to our needs as opposed to state law. City ordinance also tends to be easier to navigate for the enforcement officer as well. The city ordinance draft has a few common sense provisions added that are lacking in the state law. I fully support the implementation of the proposed city ordinance for bicycles. So that's, if anybody would like to see the letter, I have it here. And, yeah, okay, you can have that one.
It wasn't me.
So that being said, I'd be happy to open it up to the public. I see we have a couple of interested parties here who might like to speak, yeah?
You did mention before the meeting that you amended the definition. Could you briefly
Yeah, there
say
was,
what
so
you wanted to do there?
the only change that we made in our last meeting from what you have in front of you is when we defined bicycle, one of our omissions was defining it as a wheeled vehicle propelled primarily by human power, and we added by pedals. So skateboards would not be classified as bicycles.
So where does bipedals go after human?
After propelled. Propelled by pedals, primarily by human power. So that's the only two words that bipedals were the two words that were added.
Okay.
Great. That said, if there's any member of the public who would like to come forward and speak to this item, please state your name and address for the record, please.
Eli Damon, 14 Ward Avenue, Apartment B. I've already said pretty much what I had to say at the previous meetings, but I thought that if you have any questions or comments, I could respond to them.
Any questions from, go ahead, Councilor Rist.
Are you the one who petitioned?
Oh,
I'm just trying to refresh my memory. You're in favor of this bicycle?
Yeah, I apologize. I am the one who originally proposed the changes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
I don't have any questions. I think it's great.
I have actually many questions.
Okay.
But I want to make sure all the members of the public who wish to speak to this have an opportunity to speak first before I start asking questions.
Okay, I can step down.
Anyone else in the public who would like to step forward? Please do. Stay there, Deep. Stay there. State your
Ralph
name and
Sturgeon,
address.
11 Elliott Street. Unfortunately, I just walked in and I missed the reading of the police chief's statement. I will reiterate my belief that the municipality should simply follow the state law and be done with it. There is apparently a belief that under home rule that we may disagree with the state on something on which the state has already ruled, but my understanding is that that is not true. That home rule permits us to do what we want without first getting permission from the state, unless the state has already ruled on it. The state has already ruled on bicycling. The state requires us to define the business district, and that's really about it. And my belief is that we should follow the state, because if we don't follow the state, we're going to be out of compliance with the state. And that's it. I will be happy to entertain any further questions if anything comes up that I may speak about. But
Okay. Is there any other members of the public who would like to come forward first before we start some questioning? Okay, Councilor Derby?
So, if I may, I'd just like to say a couple things about that. So one of the things that we did when we went through and looked at this was we had the state law side by side with this. There's nothing in here that is out of compliance with state law. It's a couple of things where we added a little bit more restriction than state law does in wording. And as far as whether we're permitted to do that, Jack Fitzgibbon, in his opinion, said that we are permitted to do that. So our lawyer's opinion says that we are within our power to make this, and using this wording, as this is within our purview.
Mr. President.
There are, we have two people up here. If you two would mind coming to the podium, and we'll ask if there's any members of the council who would like to ask you questions, please.
No, I don't have any questions.
Please come up. Councilor Rist, do you have a question?
Not for them.
Okay.
I have a
Anybody,
question
is
for
there any member of the council who has any questions for the petitioners here? Thank you.
Just,
We're all done?
I-
Okay, Councilor Hayden, go ahead.
Did both of you attend the subcommittee meetings? I mean, did the subcommittee hear both your views? I guess.
yes.
Okay.
I mean, we were not both at every meeting, but one or the other of us was,
Yeah.
and both of us were at most.
I was at every ordinance committee meeting except the one last week.
Okay. So, I mean, your views were made known to the committee?
Oh, they were certainly made known.
Okay.
If I may speak,
Please do. You have
that
the floor.
was not my understanding of the state law. That you say Jack Fitzgibbon said that we could be more restrictive. That is not my understanding of the law. Now, I'm no lawyer, but that is absolutely not my understanding of the law, that the city may be more restrictive. I believe our other friend over here, who chooses not to speak at the moment, spoke quite eloquently at the last city council meeting that he rides through Easthampton, Northampton, Hadley, and Amherst between home and work. And why should he have to be concerned with different laws in each place? The state should rule, and that should be it.
Okay. No one has any questions?
Thank you.
Please have a seat.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions for the councilor?
Councilor Derby.
Councilor Rist, you have the
You have
floor.
a question for me?
Yes.
Okay.
I First, I wanted to say and reinforce, having been on the council a long time and having to deal with the state and state law and Jack Fitzgibbon and knowing the laws of the state, you are entitled as a home rule community to reinforce state law, as well as when you say the word restriction, I might use a different word. I might say you've strengthened the law where they may seem weak. What you cannot do is weaken state law, because you can't do it. If state law says you can't do something, you can't say it's okay in Easthampton to do that. But you can say, well, we want to do something a little stronger than state law says.
Right.
And unfortunately, I do disagree with the gentleman. I think Home Rule Charter allows each community to develop laws that they feel are appropriate for their community, and I like that. One size does not fit all. My question to you is, and I noted that you stated that you tried to simplify the original ordinance, which is the primary purpose of your writing, and I see a lot of strike-throughs. So I'm assuming, because you said this, and just correct me if I'm wrong, where I see all the strike-throughs of language in this, you've stated that we don't need to put this in our law, it's already in the state law. So basically, you are trying to make the state law primary in what we're doing. You've added a few things. One of them has to deal with, I'm glad to see the rail trail and not having motorized vehicles on the rail trail. Maybe that's not in the state law. That's an example of how you have to put it there. But you've really shown in here, I see a lot of language that's been eliminated, and I like that. I think it means it's also easier, as the chief has stated, for our enforcement, where the law is in Easthampton more defined.
Exactly. And
where
absolutely.
we want it enforced. So am I correct in that?
You're absolutely correct. Thank you for clarifying that. And I just wanted to state that I would say that probably one of the area that you should focus on right now is section 3.41, which is riding on the right-hand side of the roadway, which I think would be the area where I think our petitioners are probably looking more for the state language to be here. And what we did was we, in the original, we said you have to ride to the right-hand side of the road, period, as practicable. And it was kind of ambiguous. And so what we did was we clarified. So we said you should still ride as near to the right if you're riding in the road as possible to allow for the flow of traffic. But we wanted to add in safety concerns. So we put in as is safe unless preparing to make a left turn. So obviously if you're making a left turn and you're in the road, you shouldn't be as far to the right as you can, because be cutting across lanes of traffic doesn't make any sense, which wasn't addressed before. If the lane is too narrow to share safely, like Cottage Street, and there's cars parked on both sides, and the flow of traffic is pretty slow, and you have to take the lane because it wouldn't be safe for you to be riding as close to the car doors as possible. So we brought that stuff in. We clarified more. We tried to make it a little bit less ambiguous. So that was one of the areas. Again, exactly right on the Manhattan Rail Trail. Not only did we say that you can't ride it was already in there that you couldn't ride motorized vehicles, but we wanted to allow people who have mobility aids, like electric wheelchairs for people with disabilities, to be able to go on the bike path. And as it stood in the original ordinance, they weren't able to. And they could have gotten a $125 fine. And so also, one of the things that was brought to us by a community member was an electric assisted bicycle, which none of us had thought about. But someone who has a heart condition and can't pedal for the whole time might have an electric assisted bicycle where if they're getting tired, they can use the electric portion of their bike. So we allowed those on there, and that was cleared through the Manhattan Trail Committee. So there are some things in here that are more specific to Easthampton. And one of the things we also did was, you can see that in section 3.47, we defined our downtown district. Now, state law allows for bicycles to be ridden on sidewalks outside of a defined downtown district. So we wanted to define the downtown district and not restrict people from, for example, riding on Park Street where there's no shoulder. If you have a small child or a family riding on the sidewalk, it's probably not going to cause too much harm if they're riding to the bike path and they encounter someone walking their dog. Reasonable people can make that work. So we didn't want to criminalize a family that was riding to the bike path on Park Street or a street that is outside of the business district, so we could encourage people to ride their bikes safely. Another example would be South Street, right near my house. It's a very narrow street on a hill with curves going right to the bike path, to the old entrance of the bike path. and there's a very sharp curve, and if you're riding in the street, you know, and a car pulls out and there's someone coming around the curve, that could be very dangerous. But there's a nice protected sidewalk that doesn't get used that much, where a family could ride their bike on that sidewalk and be really safe and not disrupt anybody. I mean, the thing to remember is, with all of these things, someone who is unreasonable could break, could abuse, you know, for example, riding on the sidewalk. But that's going to happen anyway. People abuse the system every once in a while. People can drive terribly, too. So it's that, you know, that's one of the things where we said, we actually added riding, you know, some restrictions to riding on the sidewalk, maintain appropriate speed for the numbers of users on the sidewalk, yield to other users, and stay to the right when you can, so to facilitate passing, that type of thing. So we actually even put some guidance in. So.
Any other questions from councilors? Councilor Hagan?
We did receive a letter, the council received a letter, I don't know if you have it with you, from a Torrey Street resident.
Yep.
And I just wanted to go through a couple of them. I think I know the answer to some, but just in terms of like, let's start with an easy one, 358. They're concerned about reflectors. Now, I'm saying that the state law stays in place, is what you're saying.
State law stays in place.
So
and
it's
we
not
took
like
it-
we're doing away that you can ride with no reflectors.
No, you can't, or lights, and the state law was a little bit more restrictive than what we had, and so instead of going through and fixing all of the little things, it was very, there was a lot of verbiage. So we just decided to strike it and revert to the state law.
So the state law is.
The state law stands. It's actually more restrictive than what we had in our ordinance.
And then going back to 44, he does talk about, does ask a good question of what roads are wide enough, I guess, to ride double. Is that,
Well, unfortunately, I mean, that was actually one of the areas where we talked a lot, because, you know, when bicyclists ride abreast, it makes it difficult to pass. However, state law gives cyclists on any road the go-ahead to ride two abreast. So we could we couldn't weaken the state law.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Like Dan was saying before, we can't weaken that part of the state law. So while this person who wrote this letter doesn't like that section, we have no power to change that. But what we did do is we added guidance to cyclists that were riding two abreast. And what we said was, and this goes a little bit beyond, a little bit more detail than the state law, and we said, hey, listen, if you're riding two abreast, let me see if I can find this here.
340.
Riding in a group, okay. However, cyclists shall allow overtaking and ride single file to facilitate safe passing on narrow roads. So we're thinking of that. Yes.
As I was saying, the state law actually says, nothing in the clause shall relieve a bicycle of the duty to facilitate overtaking as required by
Right.
section 2. So we just kind of further defined the state law, saying that if you're riding two abreast, you still have to allow traffic to overtake you.
As reasonable, but they do have the right to ride two abreast.
And then my final one is 47, which was my concern at the last meeting, and I did speak to Salem before the meeting about this, and again, and I just want to make it clear, you're saying what you put here on 47 is just a guideline, but the state law still, to me, the state law is more restrictive. The state law says that when you allow someone to ride on a sidewalk, they yield the right of way to a pedestrian, and they have to give an audible signal before overtaking. And I think that's very important that that's somewhere or enforceable in town, because I know on Northampton Street, it's certainly a street I think bicyclists should use the sidewalk at times. It's dangerous out there for a bicycle, but it is also very narrow. Some of those sidewalks are 9 inches right on the state highway. You know, a lot of people walk it elderly, and I don't think a bike should be able to come up behind them and just simply go around them to the right. I think they should make their presence known if they have to get off their bike. I mean, you're entering their territory now. I just want to make sure and be clear that we're not taking that part, the state law, out, and people still have to yield to pedestrians on a sidewalk and give an audible signal if they're overtaking.
Right. Like,
so this is just an additional guideline.
This is just additional guideline. We couldn't weaken the state law. Okay. So it just gives a little bit more guidance, and yielding for a pedestrian or yielding for another user is also common sense too, hopefully, for the user, hopefully. But then again, common sense isn't very common, so.
Any other councilors have any questions? I do. Councilor?
I have a problem with where you were talking about riding two abreast. I just think it's too dangerous on any road to be having two bicyclists riding side by side. I mean, if you're riding side by side on Hoyok Street, I mean, the cars are going 35, 40 miles an hour. I think it's a little tough to, I mean, I was always told you ride single file.
Unfortunately, state law.
That's something that we'd have to take up with the legislature, because we can't change that part of state law.
It's a state highway
Hey.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is
I have
Northampton Street.
a couple of questions if the counselor is done.
Yeah.
You all set? The first is, in the original ordinance, we made some footnotes on section 3-17, where you can get a permit by the council for land owned by the city of Easthampton. Basically, it's the Manhattan Rail Trail. For the lack of, we can't envision what's gonna be there in the future, you know, if we wanna hold a fundraising event or something and something along that line. That footnote was removed from this one. So that says no longer do we have that, the city council have that authority. That was from the original one. There was also, I'd like to note that Councilor Hagan took the wind out of my sails on a number of questions I have already.
Thank you.
Because I also saw section 3-41, and I looked at narrow or damaged roads, and I said, who gets to determine that? The guy riding his bicycle that instant, or what, you know? So there are some little items like that that I kind of circled as we were going through. That one got answered already, that one got answered. That one got answered. That one got answered, and I do have one last one, and that was, if I don't see it there, the default is state law rules.
Exactly.
Okay?
Yep.
Why isn't that in here?
Why isn't it stated?
Yeah.
Because it's implicit within the state law is the law of the land, and our local ordinance is, you know, our local ordinance. So the state law supersedes, local ordinance comes underneath. And so I think it's just implicit. I don't know if we have to state it.
Mr. President. I just wanted to remind the President and everyone that this is an enforcement document used by our public safety officials to enforce locally, but they are responsible to also know what the state law is.
Yeah.
So whether we state it or not, this document is being enforced by our own police. Therefore, we don't have to worry that the community has to know, obviously, what state law is too, but it's the police that are enforcing this. So if something is not implicit or stated in our document, it has to be reverted to state law.
Right.
So I think the document doesn't need a lot of verbiage referring to state law, is what I'm saying. Because state law has to be implied by, or has to be enforced by the city police officers as well.
And one of the things that actually came out of our meetings was potentially seeing if we can offer the law enforcement officials a training in relation to this, which has been happening more in larger cities, so that there's a clarity, because the state law is relatively new. The language is relatively new, so kind of informing the local, and I think the state might be offering some of those. I know that the petitioners offered to give trainings, so that's something that could be worked out, so there's more clarity from the enforcement perspective. One of the things I just wanted to ask you, Justin, was the footnote that you referred to.
Yeah.
I have my copy of ordinance, and I can't find it. And I would hate to restrict the city from being able to use the bike path in the way that we thought was, because
I want me to find it.
I see a note that says, see Appendix A, Article 7, Section 1.-65.
Yes,
Is that it?
I believe so.
Okay, so maybe that's what, and, let me see if I have
Appendix A,
that.
Article 7, yeah, 1.65, that's correct.
Yeah, and if
Sorry,
that's something
not a
that's.
footnote, so
Yeah, if that's something that's, that we feel like we need to have in there, I'd be happy to keep that in there.
Can the clerk see this and investigate this? I'm wondering what.
You just want
in
to
here.
add the little note about C Appendix A? You just want to keep that little note? in
Yes,
there?
because it speaks to the city council, you know, that if we want to do something abnormal that we can't predict now, that's not written here, that by permit of the city council, they can do that. You know, some type of specialized fundraising event, or, you know, all the strange things that people think up over time.
I would think you could just add, you know,
Just
keep the
Just keep
note.
the note.
It doesn't.
Okay.
it
I
just
wanna make
reads-
sure that the intent is, that if we're gonna be passing this, the intent here that's in the minutes is that that note will be replaced in, because it got taken out.
Yeah.
Sure. I think that's completely reasonable. And I think, you know, one last thing that I wanted to mention was that our original ordinances, when we talked about helmet use, and this is something that I've been taking fairly, I've been diligent in noticing what's going on with helmet use in Easthampton, and I gotta say, I'm fairly disappointed. And we actually had a discrepancy in the ordinance, and I'm really glad that we're fixing it, because it says any person 12 years age or younger needs to wear a helmet. Now, state law is 16, and I know for a fact that we have many, many kids in Easthampton that are over the age of 12 and under the age of 16 that are riding consistently around town without helmets. And I would like to just take this time to, especially with accidents in Northampton, accidents in Southampton, the importance of protecting your head when you're riding a bicycle. When my son was 7, he fell off a bicycle that was standing still, and he wasn't wearing a helmet. He was just sitting over the bar, and he fell over, and he cracked his sinus, and we thought he was going to have to get brain surgery. It's no joke. When you fall and hit your head, it's not a joke. And I'm hoping that parents that are hearing this, how many of them there are, hopefully some, will be diligent and making sure that their kids are wearing helmets. And I mentioned to the chief that I would really like to see a heightened enforcement of kids that are underage being stopped and told that they need to wear their helmets. Because it's just a matter of time before something bad happens here. And if we're not proactive about it, then we're complicit. So I just wanted to say that, and we fixed it, so now it's in our ordinances, 16 or younger, you need to wear a helmet. And I tell all my soccer players, and I tell all my basketball players, every time I see them riding the bike to Nautic Park, they have to wear their helmet. Otherwise, they're going to be running laps, so.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for the counselor?
One quick one, just.
Councilor Hagan, go ahead.
Just while you're on, while we're still in the public hearing thing, did you, in your discussion with the chief, how much do we enforce bicycle laws, or? Again, or maybe if I don't want to get the mayor up, but while it's still a public hearing, maybe you would know.
What he said to me was that they have not had very many instances of having to enforce or having to stop people. Not very many, but there have been some.
There have been some.
Any further questions for the counselor? Okay, that's it, Councilor Derby.
Okay, I would like to move to amend the city ordinances, Chapter 3, bicycles.
That's it.
Second.
I would like to.
Do you want me to read all the sections?
No, just
Reference the second.
reference the version.
The version of July 11th, 2012 with pedals added.
And the note.
And the note added.
Okay.
On section.
I'll second that motion if it hasn't seconded.
Okay, now we have a motion on the table to recommend that Chapter 3 bicycles be amended as previously described. Is there any further comment or questions on the motion? Councilor Riss?
I just wanted to compliment the ordinance committee. This is hard work. I've been to a few ordinance where we had to work out law, and it's not perfect, but it has definitely simplified, and I think given the police a better understanding of where we want to go with bicycle safety. And I'm glad the petitioners brought it in. Thank you for participating in government, and I think this is the way to go. It's not perfect, and I wish the two abreast issue that Councilor Ogilevitz brought up was also something we could deal with, but we can't. So at least we have something simplified here.
One last thing. I just wanted to say that the ordinance subcommittee recommended this 3-0.
Any other Councilor
Yeah, I
McCoy?
would just like, again, because I've been on ordinance, congratulate the committee on an outstanding job, and also to Councilor Derby, I think you did an outstanding job defending and clarifying the work, so thank you for your work.
Thanks.
I just want to make sure, did we mention in the motion?
Councilor Ziegler, go ahead.
Thank you. Did we make mention in the motion about Appendix A, Article 7? Section 1265.
Yeah.
Yes.
With
Yep,
okay.
with the
Yep.
That said, what I'll state is that I'm actually going to abstain. I see this as about a 90% solution. I have a little problem with it, not enough to vote no, but not enough to vote yes, so I will abstain. That said, are there any further comments on this motion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
One abstention, please. Motion passes.
Move
That
the
said,
public hearings be closed.
Second.
thank you. We have a motion on the table to close the public hearings. All those in favor?
Aye.
Public hearing is closed. Thank you. That said, we head back to our committee reports. I believe I left off, and you can correct me, Counselor.
With me.
Counselor Derby, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. We are going to, I wanted to announce that we're going to meet a little bit differently this coming week. We are going to have a joint public hearing with the Planning Board at 6 p.m. on September 25th. It's going to be at 50 Payson in Conference Room B, and it's going to we're going to discuss Section 11.2, pre-existing non-conforming structures, and so that is. And then we are also going to have a committee meeting following that, where we are going to be discussing the full spectrum of issues that we have before us. Try to clear up this agenda.
Okay,
That concludes my.
thank you. Lacking Counselor Psychowski with another, I guess I can go back to Counselor Derby if you'd like to actually give the property report tonight.
No report this evening.
Thank you very much. New business, Counselor Winning.
Yes, move that the mayoral appointments be sent on to appointment subcommittee.
Second.
We have a motion on the table to move the mayoral appointments of 3 people to appointment subcommittee. Any comments on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions or objections? None spoken. Again, Counselor Derby,
Thank you
you've
so
got the
much.
next one.
I'd like to move that the request for over-quota all-alcoholic liquor licenses from Riff's Joint and Popcorn Noir be moved to ordinance subcommittee.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion on the table to move the request for overquarter all alcohol license, liquor license from Riff's Joint and Popcorn Noir to ordinance for review and consideration. Any comment on this motion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions or objections? Okay, motion passes. I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We have a motion, is there?
Second.
Seconded, thank you. We have a motion on the table to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any- Motion to adjourn. Thank you. Concludes our
Right,
meeting.
got the gavel tonight.